the small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing.
The U.S. truckers had their meeting yesterday with U.S. senators in Washington, D.C. Why were they able to have a meeting with U.S. senators and their government, and Canada, with their trucker protest, were not allowed to have their meeting with Trudeau or any other of members of Parliament in Canada? What is going on here, guys? Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the differences in what happened with the U.S. trucker protest in the U.S. and D.C. as compared to what happened with the Canadian trucker protest in Canada. The U.S. truckers just had a meeting with some of their Senate members yesterday. And of course, Canada's trucker protest had no meetings with Trudeau or any of their members of Parliament in Ottawa. So why did that happen? And let's maybe extrapolate a talking point out of that later. So guys, if you like what you see, like what you hear, first please subscribe to my YouTube channel, RPKULBABA, as well as subscribe to me on Rumble and Telegram, as well as follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and my Facebook page, Real Ryan Kolbaba. Thanks, guys. Okay, so let's compare and contrast the, pretty much the differences in the U.S. trucker convoy approach as compared to the Canadian trucker approach, Freedom Convoy. Let's take a look at what happened yesterday with the trucker meeting with the U.S. Senate.
Through Congress.
Well, on our end, I'll let the professionals answer that one, but on our end, what I would say is, if he vetoes, it just shows how out of touch he is with the American people.
Or the science.
Or the science.
And by the way, the hypocrisy was evident for the world to see. Ron and I were both on the floor of the House of Representatives last week. On the floor of the House, you had 535 members of Congress sitting there. There weren't 5 masks in the entire room. Now, a week earlier, they had decreed that you had to be tested and wear a mask, and a bunch of us weren't going to come if they were going to do that. They finally looked at the poll numbers and backed away from that. But these same tyrants that sit there, look, these Democratic politicians, when they're behind closed doors, and this was true a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, when they're behind closed doors, they take their masks off, they're laughing, they're yucking it up, and then they step out and they see these devices y'all are holding, cameras, and suddenly they go, oh crap, I gotta put a mask on. That's not science, that's theater. That is empty politics. And it's one thing if they want to wear masks. I've actually joked that I want to introduce a resolution saying Democrats in Congress are required to wear masks for the rest of their lives.
Joking, by the way.
Okay, so there you just saw some footage of the truckers meeting with some of the U.S. senators, Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Ron Johnson, Dr. Pierre Corey, as well as one of the main co-organizers of the People's Convoy, Brian Brozzi, was it? Brozzi. So yeah, it was much a different approach or much different results so far from the U.S. Trucker convoy as opposed to the Canada one. Now, I only showed a brief clip of that. I could show a longer clip, but for time purposes, we won't do that. So what happened in that meeting that they had? Well, they talked about a lot of different topics in regards to why the truckers are in D.C. Obviously, a couple senators were there, and they were talking about one of the biggest things that Ted Cruz actually pointed out, which you saw, was the COVID theater, the mask theater, and how people would go in meetings. Of course, he attacked the Democrats, of course, which is, what politicians do, of course, brings politics into it, but that's neither here nor there. But he said, yeah, when they go into their meetings in their hall, they take off their masks. And when they go back out in front of the camera, they put them back on, like it's all a bunch of theater, Whether that happens or not, I don't know, most likely. But they also brought up the fact that, a lot of healthcare workers are being fired. A lot of U.S. Army, Marine Corps people have been fired over this mandate. And this is obviously government senators talking about these issues. They talked about the issues of children, how these restrictions and mandates have been harming children, how they can't read facial expressions, their cognitive impairments are increasing. They're having speech issues. The traumatizing of children in regards to they think they're going to harm their parents and their grandparents. This was the stuff that was talked about in a meeting. And let me also say, this meeting was held in a looked like a boardroom of some sort with about 50 people, about probably 40 cameramen, media people, as well as about a couple doctors and a couple senators with a couple of truckers, and they were discussing all these issues which needed to be discussed. What else did they talk about? The convoy organizer, Brian, he brought up a couple good points about, how the corporate legacy media has treated them even so unfairly, how they just look to attack anything negative that they can attach onto their convoy, onto their meeting, and just demonize the truckers and the protesters themselves, which is exactly what's going on here in Canada and probably all across the world as well. They talked about they're not anti-vax. They represent the people. This is a people's movement. This is about freedom. It's not about left. It's not about right. It's not about Democrat. Not about Republican. It's just about freedom of choice. That was his exact message in that boardroom. And that's the type of meeting that we should have had up in Canada as well. And of course that didn't happen. What else did they talk about? They talked about how the science, especially with masks, has never been there. He even had a doctor in there, as well as Senator Ron Johnson, saying it's been known for 2 years, that masks don't work. And of course, nobody in that boardroom was wearing a mask, of course, except for one person. They talked about all sorts of these issues that need to be discussed in regards to the restrictions and the mandates. And I know a couple, one reporter, or maybe even two, was like, asking Brian, the organizer, what do you want to accomplish? Is it good enough to just have a meeting? Do you want to meet with the White House? And he said, you know what, we want to meet with anybody. It's not our goal just to have meetings. Our goals will be accomplished once we get those meetings had or made, right? So they want to, obviously end the restrictions and the mandates, and they want to hold meetings with whoever they can. And yesterday was a good step toward that goal. They met with senators and even a doctor in that boardroom, and they had a discussion, probably an hour, about a 45-minute long discussion, which got, relatively good media attention. And that's the whole point of what's, the movement, the trucker protest is trying to do: create a discussion, create awareness. And they took a good step toward that yesterday. They covered a lot of relevant topics with those couple senators that were there, which needs to happen. We have to have these discussions. They covered a variety of topics, again, like masks, children, the restrictions, the mandates. And even, some of the senators were totally on that side of the fence with this. They said, yeah, these restrictions and mandates got to end, and this has to go through the appropriate steps through the Senate, through Congress, through government, and we got to get this going. A complete contrast to what happened in Canada with the trucker convoy protests here. It was completely different, and we'll get into why this was different just after. But again, now let's take it back to what happened in Canada, in Ottawa. Let me show you a clip of how Justin Trudeau thinks, or what he thinks, about the trucker convoy and the people in it.
Conservative Party members can stand with people who wave swastikas. They can stand with people who wave the Confederate flag. We will choose to stand with Canadians who deserve to be able to get to their jobs, who be able to get their lives back. These illegal protests need to stop, and they will, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, right. Are you kidding me, Trudeau? You see how Trudeau treated the Canadian people, the Canadian truckers, calling them, basically Nazis with swastikas, Confederate flags, refusing to meet with them. A complete contrast to the meetings that the U.S. senators had with the U.S. truckers. Complete polar opposite. And of course, did you see, did you see the difference in science between Canada's C-19 science and U.S. C-19 science? Did you see in the U.S. boardroom meeting there, probably 50 people, one person wearing a mask, no socially distanced, people shaking hands. But in Canada, people in the House of Commons socially distanced. They're all wearing their mask. Just the COVID theater, the dollar sign science, the political science, the theatrical science, polar opposite in Canada than the US. Think about that for just a minute. Why is that like that? It's a joke. Anyway, so we all know what else Trudeau has said about us. I wanted to provide that clip specifically just to show you the difference between how people act in government in a boardroom or a parliamentary setting. Okay, masks, socially distant. No masks, no social distance. Complete different politics with this virus for whatever reason, right? So obviously, in Canada, we all know that Justin Trudeau called people racists, misogynists, basically Nazis with Confederate flags, with swastika symbols. He refused to have meetings with the truckers. Nobody whatsoever. I think they might have had a couple meetings with a couple people. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. I don't know. But yeah, there was no general meetings like the ones in the U.S. The one in the U.S. just yesterday, and obviously we all know what happened in Canada. The police started trampling people. They started smashing windows. They started hitting people with their guns and pushing people back and took people out of the Ottawa area. And of course, we all know Trudeau invoked the Emergency Act, which gave them ungodly powers to do whatever they want, freeze bank accounts, detain people for X amount of time. Tamara Lich, Pat King, and a couple other people. It was just a complete different response. In the U.S. you have diplomacy going on, which is what the Canadian truckers were going for, and in Canada it was just a very authoritative, power-grabbing approach. Two polar opposite responses from government. It was really unfortunate to see, the refusal of Trudeau or Freeland or anyone to actually meet with the truckers themselves and have a discussion, have a diplomatic discussion, try to meet in the middle. It did happen at the Coots border, at least with the RCMP there in Alberta. There was discussions between the RCMP there and the truckers. Okay, that's one thing. But again, with Ottawa, it was just an extreme authoritative approach, no dialogue, no meetings. And of course, instead of doing that, Trudeau invokes the Emergency Act and just goes off the rails on a power grab situation. We all know what happens with that, unfortunately. So now, why is that? Why was there a different approach in Canada to the U.S. approach yesterday? Why? I'm not totally sure, but I'm going to take an educated guess here. And again, I don't actually know too much about the U.S. trucker protest. We haven't seen much on the media about it, so I don't know the lead up to them arriving. If they had any prior discussions along the way, I don't know. But I'm going to assume, and this is just my opinion, my guess on this situation right now. We all know Justin Trudeau and Miss Freeland, which is quite the ironic name, wouldn't you think? They have direct ties in some form to being on a board of directors or some type of investment in the WEF, the World Economic Forum, of course, with Klaus Schwab. And I don't know the situation in the U.S. if like Ted Cruz or Joe Biden or if any of those people have any political ties or economic ties to that organization either. I don't know. If they do or don't, that would be very telling. But I'm going to ascertain, take a guess, that is probably a core issue. Because we all know what Klaus Schwab has said about Trudeau and the Canadian cabinet in a fairly famous, I don't want to say press conference, but in a meeting, in a gathering where he said he basically owns half of Canada's cabinet. He owns, Trudeau and the Canadian government, stuff like that he was saying. And we all know Trudeau does have financial invested interests in companies related to the shot. So I'm going to assume that there is a political and a financial reason why we have had a different response in Canada as opposed to the response from the U.S. senators or from the U.S. That were given by Ted Cruz and Senator Ron Johnson. That's going to be my guess. If anyone else has any information, please feel free to put that in the comments section and let us know what you think. But that's going to be my guess. Is obviously, you know, the theater goes in front and then the politics are behind. You know, and there's this veil dividing the two. The C19 theater, the C19 science, and then the actual science and the you know, the political theater, the politics behind the scenes. I'm going to guess it's something to do with WEF. That's my guess only. But it was such a contrast to see diplomacy versus authoritative tyranny, really. It's unfortunate, but you know, that's how it is. You know, that's what politics are all about. Unfortunately, the politics and the science is different in regards to geography for some reason. North south of the 49th, there's differences, and even in provinces and states, the science for some reason is just different. For whatever reason, which some of us, you know, obviously know why, but that's the world we live in now. So, again, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. Again, if you like what you see in here, please follow and subscribe to me on all my other channels, RPKULBABA. And we will see where this world takes us tomorrow, and we'll be back to film another video as soon as something else interesting happens. So thank you guys for watching and listening. Have a good day, guys. Thanks.